Well, are we going to talk about scripts? In general, my policy is this: first figure out the standard tools, and then stick in various gadgets and send your car for pumping. So we will consider the analysis of this script to be an advance on the future. Or as my parents told me when I was a child, we'll buy it for you now, but it's for you for the new year. For me, all these enhancements make sense when you work with arrays of data. Well, for example, make operational graphics that do not strongly claim to be original, and speed within acceptable quality limits is more important there. And maybe that's why I didn't install such things for myself for 10 years, since I could do a 5-second animation for several days. And believe me, this was not due to the fact that I had to press buttons without using helpers. It's just that in any software there are many ways to solve the same problem. Everyone determines their own path independently, so adding such jokes to the course will be as situational as possible. Let's try not to become hostages of scriptwriters, but also not to be considered ignorant. The script itself in its entirety can be disassembled for about an hour, but if you add more examples, then all 3. Therefore, I will talk about it so that we can just keep moving forward without clogging your cache with unnecessary amounts of information. What else can I say about the script itself before we start parsing it? That it was created by designers for designers, which is sometimes not enough for AE developers. So he's all such a friendly user and so on and so on. But as I said before, we will use it wisely. And then who knows, today he is, and tomorrow. I'm glad that you figured out where to download and in which folder to throw the script. For me personally, this is a very indicative situation that when a person can download a script himself or a plugin, install it himself and, in principle, not make some kind of tragedy out of it. Since throughout your journey in Moshhen design, there will often be a need to install something before, download something somewhere, maybe buy something somewhere. By the way, even the official installation support is not always legible. And sometimes you just have to puzzle for hours in order to stick in some seemingly simplest thing. We will assume that this is some kind of stress tolerance test, which in the future will definitely play into your hands and help you stay calm in various situations. After you have uploaded the script to the desired folder, it will appear in the Windows window. The Windows window generally serves to somehow externally customize our author effect. You can add some menus here, remove them by ticking the boxes opposite. Well, in general, somehow modify, adjust to yourself. I can say about myself that I never do this. My workspace is always default and that's enough for me. Standard, default. I just open it and work in it. Well, as I said, in addition to all these interface settings, the scripts also lie in the same menu. They are usually at the very bottom. As you can see, I have only 4 of them, 2 of which have already been pre-installed along with the author effect. This is Keith Knowles from Paths. Cool stuff, we'll definitely talk about it. GIF gone. This is a tool for displaying GIFs from the author effect. Moshhen tools is what we are going to talk about. Envir competitor. I have never run this script, because it has too fashionable a name and it repels me. Let's move on to our Moshhen tools too. We click and see that we have approximately such a menu here. You may have it a little bit in a different place and in a different form. This does not change the essence. In this case, this menu can be freely moved to any part of the author effect. I suggest that we immediately define it somewhere so that it does not overlap anything and does not interfere with us particularly. To do this, we can build this menu, any menu of any script, into some part of the program. To do this, you just need to usually clamp your menu in some gray area. Come on, hook up. Come on. Okay, hello. The main thing is not to panic. A Moshhen goose is not a Moshhen tool. It worked. Now we have such blue areas that indicate where we can attach our menu. I'll put it on the right side of the screen. It seems to me that here is a very suitable and convenient place for her. Just releasing the cursor and our menu sticks to the interface of the author of the effect. You can slightly grow it up so that all the parameters are visible. With a simple click, we collapse this menu. Here you can also conveniently collapse and expand the necessary tools. Okay, back to Motion Tools. Let's talk about its capabilities. In order to do this, I will create a new composition and create, for example, some shape in this composition. This will roll. As we remember, when creating a shape, we create an anchor point in the center of the layer. And as I said before, we can edit this anchor point with this icon here. If we press it, we can freely move the anchor wherever we want. Plus, we can clamp the control and then our incorporation will stick to the main points of our object. Motion Tools took care of us so that we once again did not take our left hand off our face and created here such a tool that is responsible for moving the epoch relative to our object or layer. Let's just click and understand how it works. In principle, it duplicates the same possibility of the anchor sticking to the main guides, just as if we used a clamped control button and moved our anchor. I think everything is clear with this. Simple, but cool stuff. Next, I think that we will analyze these two parameters, elastic and bounces. In order to demonstrate the effect of these parameters more clearly, I will create some simple animation of our rectangle by position. Let's say it moves from the top of the screen to the bottom in 2 keys. Open the value of the P position on the keyboard. We put the first key and the day after 7 frames I will put the second key there. Now we have a simple linear animation. But with the help of elastic and bounces parameters, we will be able to diversify our animation a little. In motion design, for those who are just starting this path, one of the most popular actions or expressions is the damping oscillation. Very often beginners abuse this thing. Later on in the course we will talk more about this. For now, let's figure out how it works. In order to apply this effect to our object, we must first make sure that either the key or the parameter itself is selected. After that, we press the elastic. Let's play the animation and see what happened. In a nutshell, I will explain the principle of operation. In fact, our object now seems to be tied to such an invisible spring. After the animation is completed, he still makes some oscillatory movements. In addition to the fact that we can simply use this eraser, we also have small settings in order to regulate the behavior of our object, or rather that invisible spring. Let's talk about them. Let's go to the effects window and see what we can twist here. The first is the amplitude. If we increase the value, we will increase the amplitude of the oscillation of our object. The next parameter is frequency. He is responsible for the purity of the vibrations of our object. Let's change the value in a bigger way. We will see that our object has become more twitchy. The child is responsible for the degree of attenuation, that is, relatively speaking, to what extent the spring will have some more rigid degree of impact on the object or soft. That is, if we reduce the value, we will see that our object will fluctuate quite strongly. If we increase the value, then our invisible spring will not let him swing much. With all these vibration settings, you need to be as careful as possible not to twist the values so that the object behaves as naturally as possible or does not twitch once again. Therefore, we will try to approach these settings wisely. Let me remove this effect and move on to the next one. The next effect we have is bounces. In the same way, I will select our keys and apply bounces. Here, I think, everything is clear, plus or minus. This is a kind of simulation of the fact that our object collides with an invisible floor or with some kind of surface. That is, he makes a rebound. This theme itself helps to create such a plus or minus physically correct interactions of objects. Of course, it is very limited in itself, but at the same time it is more than enough in many cases. Let's pay attention to the settings of our rebound. Let's go to the effects window and scroll through the different values here. The amplitude, of course, is responsible for the rebound force of our object. The next parameter, its gravity, how much our object will be pressed to the ground. If you, for example, reduce the value of gravity to some small values, then you can easily fake a landing on the moon of a blue rectangle. Well, accordingly, if we increase this value, then our object will bounce not so high. Next, we have the setting of the maximum number of bounces. In this case, it costs 5, you can put, for example, 1, which will mean that our object will bounce only once after it finishes its animation. The next tab is a jump in jump out. Let's check the box here and see what it does. After activating this parameter, our object is repelled from the back side of the floor. Which, in principle, may also be applicable in some cases. Well, we have sorted out these two parameters. Cool things and, in principle, can be used quite often. After all, it's nice when we put only two keys, and the animation looks somehow more elegant and cunning. The next parameter we'll talk about, clone parameters. What is she responsible for? It can simply duplicate your keys in different ways. You can, for example, allocate two keys that you have set, there are as many keys as you want, and move this slider to the place where you want to duplicate these keys, and then click clone. And accordingly, we can see that he puts two exactly the same keys in this place. There are additional chips from its option. If, by the way, we hover over each parameter, then we will see that we can just click, or you can add a hotkey like 8 and Shift, and these effectors have additional features. I have not yet disassembled such things from elastic and bounces, because they are very specific. But the clone has a very cool thing. This is, for example, when you duplicate keys in reverse, by and large creating a copy of the keys backwards. This can be useful in order to create some looped animations. I will delete these two keys. Also, the keys are simply highlighted, and in this case we use a hint. We clamp the shift and click on the clone. And so we got the reverse animation of our object. Cool. Let me delete the two keys and move on to the next features of this script. Here we have a window like this on top. I'll explain why I don't want to talk much about it, because, in my opinion, we still have to start working with keys with classical methods first. When you learn how to do this, feel some kind of animation, you can already connect similar tools here. They work on this principle. Let's say we want to change this key to a soft one. We've already done this with our wheel. We can press 9 on the keyboard, or we can create a similar key, Autobezier is called, using this script. Click and see that a key is being created for us here. What other settings does it have? Look, there are values here that affect the graph. I will open the editor graph and see our schedule. I will change the value to clearly demonstrate that this slider is tied to this graph and edits it. That is, you can influence the fade rate of your animation using this slider. On the one hand, it is convenient, on the other hand, I still like to use this lever more. In my opinion, this gives more control over what is happening. I'll hide our count and deter. Well, you can also change it to a linear key, of course. And all these settings also have the ability to hold down an additional button on the keyboard, click on it and get some other result. For me personally, this is not a super convenient thing, I do not see in it such a straight speed and optimization gain. Well, maybe someone will disagree with me, who is already used to this tool and has been using it for a long time. Okay, let's move on and figure out more in this line. In order to clearly demonstrate how it works, I will duplicate the player on my neck 4 times. Sometimes in a project there is a need to shift the layers relative to each other on the timeline for some time. Let's say we need to shift each layer relative to another layer by 4 frames. We can do this manually by moving each layer step by step, or we can use this setting from which is called sequence. There are a number of parameters here, which we will talk about now. I will return everything to its original position again, select all these layers, and also my task is to make a ladder of these layers shifted by 4 frames. To do this, we can choose the type of shift. In this case, I have a random. I'll change it for a ladder like this. And here I will put 4 offset. The offset value corresponds to how many frames each layer will shift relative to another layer. After we have selected the necessary settings, parameters, we click on the sequence icon. Bang, and we get the shift we need. I will definitely tell you how to apply such shifts in animation. So far, we just understand the work of the tool itself. What else is there? But another cool thing is that we can mix our layers randomly. This icon is responsible for this. After we have selected it, click on the sequence again and we get shuffling layers randomly. To give you a little better understanding of how this can be applied in practice, I will give you an example. Let's say you have created some object that is somehow animated and you want to create a group of such objects, but you don't want them to move the same way. In general, you want to achieve some kind of fake independence, that each of them lives his own life, but this is exactly what this setting is for. You shift the layers relative to each other and get such a variation effect. You saved time, and the viewer was satisfied. What other useful settings are there? Let's say you've changed your mind about making a fuss among your layers and want to return everything to its original state, and there is a certain setting for this case. To do this, you need to make sure that it is the layers that are selected, and not the keys. Just collapse all the parameters, select the layers and click this icon. As we can see, all our layers are aligned relative to our slider. If we move it somewhere and click this icon again, the layers will stick to the place where it will be installed. Also, using this icon, we can move not layers, but keys on these layers. I will press the Y button on the keyboard, open all our keys that we have set, select them, and let's say I want to move them all for a second. I will click the icon and now, as we see, our keys jump over regardless of the layer. We have 5 more of these tabs left. We will talk about them in the following lessons. There will be a lesson about text animation, and there we will analyze right on a concrete example how to use them and what they give. In the meantime, what I have just told you is enough to keep us moving forward. Of course, I would like to move from words to practice. So in the next lesson we will already proceed directly to animation. We will try to implement theoretical information in some of our workpieces, thereby accumulating experience in its application. I'll see you in the next lesson. I'll be waiting. For now.